parents' perception of safety nowadays is that it's not as safe as it was when we were kids, when actually all the data says the opposite, is actually safer than it was when we were kids. But because of our exposure to 24-hour media, you hear all the worst stories about what happens to children when they're out and about. And I think I've got two girls, and I, who know a lot about it, have always been a little bit uncertain about, can they just go off and play in the park themselves? So I do think that's changed massively. And I mean, the other thing is, obviously, there's a lot more choice. I mean, for us as kids, I think it was, you either go and run around or you read a book, or you've got, I'm showing my age now, you've got 4 channels on the telly at home, or that's it. So I think now there's far more choice for young people.
From Coordinate Sports, it's The Drive Phase, a show about sports founders, leaders and experts and the stories behind their business journeys. Our guest on this episode is Mark Lawrie, CEO of StreetGames. Since launching in 2005, the charity has made a huge impact and changed the lives of thousands of young people through their national projects and partnerships. A former teacher, Mark was a key member of the senior team at StreetGames from the early days and has seen its growth and community-driven expansion. As he steps into the chief executive role at a time of turmoil and opportunity for the charity, we sit down and discuss how he plans to make an impact by leading StreetGames through the pandemic and into a bright future. Enjoy the show. Okay, so delighted to have Mark Lawrie with us today. He's CEO of one of probably the UK's leading third sector sport organisation, StreetGames. The stats kind of speak for themselves. Since launching in 2007, organisation has grown to now serve more than 530,000 young people across 1,400 projects nationally. So I'm sure we'll get into all of those stats and all the great work that the organisation is doing, but essentially perfectly placed in the heart of the sector to give us some great insight. So Mark, welcome to the Drive Phase podcast.
Thanks very much, James. Nice to be here.
No problem at all. Looking forward to our chat. So what we tend to do to start off with, just let our guests get to know you a little bit. So we tend to just dive into your early life, really. So are you able to describe your childhood to us?
Yeah, of course. So I grew up in a council estate with my brother and sister. We had not a huge amount of money, I have to say. So we didn't go on lots of posh foreign holidays and things. So actually sport was the thing that filled any time that I wasn't in school. So I used to spend all my time with my brother and my friends on the local recreation ground, kicking a football about. I'm probably one of the only people, I've told this story before, who's ever broken into a school for naughty children because they had a tennis court. And we used to go in there and play tennis during the summer when all the kids were away.
You're not actually the first guest we've had who's broken into tennis court to play as a kid. So that's really interesting. In terms of school, just looking at that, what's your kind of memories of school and sport? I mean, a lot of people, if they were sportsy, they had a really great experience in school. How did you find it? That shape you?
I'll be honest, I didn't have a brilliant experience at school because I've never been a top sports person. I've never played at kind of first team level in anything. There were one or two things that I really enjoyed. So I strangely enjoyed cross country. I've always liked long distance running, that kind of thing. And I liked playing lots of different sports, but was never good enough to really enjoy the kind of competitive school team stuff. And I had a difficult experience at primary school. I played right back for the primary school football team, and used to have a coach who would bawl and yell at us, which I know is something that others will remember from their school days. So my love of sport was always kind of in the informal kind of recreational area.
No, it's interesting that because obviously a lot of people have that. If they have that experience at school, it might turn them off sport and an activity for life. But it seemed like obviously quite a lot of synergies with what you're doing now. Obviously, really active in the community back then. One of the questions. This is just my own curiosity, really. I don't know if you've got kids, but growing up, I look back at what I used to do, and it's similar to yourself, play out in the street all hours with my friends and family. We don't seem to have that experience with the children. Obviously, everyone's locked up at the moment, but what's your kind of take on that in terms of the kind of the sedentary lifestyle that we've got or the protectiveness we have of our kids at the moment?
I think it's really hard because when you look at some of the data, I think parents' perception of safety nowadays is that it's not as safe as it was when we were kids, when actually all the data says the opposite, is actually safer than it was when we were kids. But because of our exposure to 24-hour media, you hear all the worst stories about what happens to children when they're out and about. And I think I've got two girls, and even I, who know a lot about it, have always been a little bit uncertain about, can they just go off and play in the park themselves? So I do think that's changed massively. And I mean, the other thing is, obviously, there's a lot more choice. I mean, for us as kids, I think it was, you either go and run around or you read a book, or you've got, I'm showing my age now, you've got 4 channels on the telly at home, or that's it. So I think now there's far more choice for young people.
Definitely. No, I'm a little bit younger. I had 5 channels, not 4. So, yeah, definitely. So I'll take that back to let my dad know, because he seemed to think that he was walking to school at 5 years old, 2 miles to school. So maybe he's right. Anyway, in terms of your moving on, so in terms of your kind of early career, I know you started out in teaching, primary school teaching, right?
Yeah. So I did my primary school teacher training in Birmingham, and it's kind of the place that set my interest off around the kind of work that StreetGames does now. So one of my teaching placements was in a place called Borsall Heath in Birmingham, where a lot of the kids had very little, if anything, in terms of life outside school. And we used to the school I was in were actually Warwickshire cricket champions, even though they didn't have a blade of grass in their school. So they had playground quick cricket, and the kids just loved it. And it was the coaches from Edgbaston that used to come up and work with them. So from that kind of point onwards, even though primary school teachers obviously teach lots of different subjects, I could see how important sport was for these kids in terms of a really positive experience and something they could succeed at when other parts of their lives weren't great.
Yeah, and what was it like at that time? Was it similar to it is now in terms of, obviously schools are taking on the education side of things, but they're doing so much more, right? They're kind of the hub, and especially now you can see it when children are able to access that. They're providing so much more, the part they're playing with the children's lives outside of education. Was it like that at that time, or is that just coming in, the extra responsibility?
Yeah, no, it was like that. And I think it's, when I first started teaching, it was just when they introduced the national curriculum, so back in the mid-90s. And I think there was still very much a kind of culture at that point of teachers providing lots of out-school activities. So you'd had different sports clubs and different arts clubs and those kinds of things. And I think as time's gone on, those schools that still do that, who are brilliant, I think it's increasingly under pressure, because I'm married to a teacher and they just don't have time in the way that they did before. And it's really hard with all the other pressures to then find the time to provide that kind of extracurricular, really good, fun stuff that makes such a huge difference to the kids.
Yeah, definitely. I guess families are relying on them so much as well. I know we'll probably touch on the kind of holiday angle, talking about what StreetGames are doing now, but yeah, it's interesting to see how things have kind of progressed. Speaking of StreetGames, I know going back, stepping up 2007, you got involved around that time, but I know it was your predecessor, former CEO, recently CEO Jane Ashworth. Are you able to just expand on the kind of origin story of StreetGames and where we got to today?
Yeah, so Jane was working on secondment. She worked for Sport England, and before that she'd done lots of things in local authorities and had worked as a youth worker as well. And she was on secondment in the office for the Deputy Prime Minister, which was the part of government responsible for regeneration and for helping improve the lives of people who lived in low-income communities. And the idea for StreetGames really was partly born there. So while Jane was working in the office for the Deputy Prime Minister, she worked with a number of areas that were subject to regeneration projects on how to use sport to get young people involved and how to provide the right sport. And when her secondment finished, she took the opportunity with 3 other people to establish StreetGames as a charity, and established back in 2005 and then launched in late 2006. And it was all Jane's passion and energy for making young people's lives better through sport that really got StreetGames going. And when I joined in 2007, I joined to help manage our Young Volunteers programme, which at that point was funded by the Co-op. And there were only 4 of us actually working for the organisation, which when I look at it now is crazy, because there's about think we've got 70 staff and another 40 or so people who do tutoring and things for us now. But there were 4 of us in this tiny little office in Stockport in a building company, just kind of getting the whole thing going.
So when you first started, you were managing the volunteer program. Is that still running now? Or
it's really important to us. I mean, we don't have it under the same kind of guise. The co-op supported it for a good 8 or 9 years in the first instance, but volunteering and young people taking a leading role in their communities is still absolutely integral to what we do with StreetGames. And we've worked with over, I think it's 17,000 young people since we started the volunteering work. And funnily enough, some of the young people who were on some of our original residentials were there to say goodbye to Jane in December, and they're all now 26, 27, and they've got jobs. One's a firefighter, one's a teacher. So, and all of them talk about how volunteering with StreetGames was part and a really important part of their journey.
We'll touch on how you and the team and Jane managed to grow the organisation and scale it. But in terms of the programs you're doing at the moment, I know we've mentioned a few stats before, and obviously really impressive expansion. But what are the programs you have at the moment? I know you've got the kind of the 3 pillars: is it safer, healthier, more successful? What kind of sits underneath that? So,
yeah, that's the way that we describe it now. So about making communities healthier, safer, and more successful through sport. So in the kind of area of healthier, at the moment, we're leading on youth social prescribing for children and young people. So you might be aware about the adult social prescribing that's been talked about quite a lot in the press, which is about not using medicines to treat people when they go to the GP, but finding alternative things that can help them, because lots of people who go to their GP don't actually need medicine. They maybe need to do some exercise, or they need to get more social contact, or those kinds of things. So that's part of our healthier work at the moment. Is we led the pilot for youth social prescribing, and we've just written the guidance that's available now for it, and we're trying to get that out into as many different communities as we can to help the link workers, the social prescribing link workers, connect with young people and find positive things to help them with their physical and mental health. Mental health is another big thing for us. So a lot of the work that we do is training coaches and leaders and project managers in how to support young people's mental health. And particularly during COVID, obviously, we've been running online training courses on mental health conversations, so that coaches, even if they can't obviously get in front of young people and kick a ball about with them or play tennis or do dance or whatever they're doing, can still have contact with young people and support them through some of the challenges they're facing at the moment.
Are they running nationally then across the whole country, all those initiatives?
Yeah, so social prescribing at the moment, we're just starting to roll it out. Initially, we tested it in 4 locations in Sheffield, in Luton, in Brighton, and one of the London boroughs as well. But now we've got a network around our social prescribing youth network of about 500 individuals from lots of different places. That one's very much in its early stages. And the beauty, I suppose, if there is one, of the challenges we've all faced in the last 10 months is that the online offer for training, we can train anyone from John O'Groats to Land's End and anything in between now. So we've found that really positive in terms of spreading the reach of our mental health training.
In terms of the model, I know you've got 70 staff and the tutors, etc. But one thing struck me about StreetGames over the years, obviously coming in contact with the organisation, was kind of the partnership working, right? So you partner with a lot of delivery partners out in the community, or is everything in-house now? How does that, what's the setup on them?
We've never delivered, in inverted commas, anything directly in local neighbourhoods, because we've always worked through a network of what we call locally trusted organisations. So what we understand about the communities and neighbourhoods we support is trust is just fundamental, and that trust can only really be earned by the people who live, know the local kids, know the young people. So we support a network of around 1,400 community-based organisations across England, Scotland and Wales predominantly. And all of them are embedded and running activity in their local neighbourhoods, and we then provide lots of things that help them do that better.
So those type of organisations, would they be kind of sports clubs, coaching providers? What else would they like? Is it youth clubs, things like that?
Yeah, it is. So not so many traditional sports clubs. Only about 15% of our kind of locally trusted organisations are NGB affiliated clubs. Lots of youth groups, quite a lot of charities, community interest companies. We work with housing associations. We work with leisure trusts. So really what we want to work with are firstly people who want to work with us and focus on the young people we're bothered about, but then also those organisations who are closest to their communities and most able to make a difference.
Okay, and I guess I want to pick up on in terms of the state, I guess the state of youth services in the country. I was totally different to when I was younger. And I don't know in terms of politics. I guess I might have to tread carefully, etc. But I just see the visibility of youth centres, right? I know there was a few when I grew up, and they're not there anymore. So I guess your organisation, others like you, are filling that gap. I'm assuming. But what do you think about the situation? Be really interesting to get your take on it, seeing what you've done and scaled over these years.
It's really challenging, is the honest answer. I think there's been a big shift when you look at youth services from what I would have called universal kind of open access provision, which is probably the kind of thing you would would have gone to as kids, into needing to focus more on acute provision for those young people who've got really targeted additional needs. And I think that makes it very hard because certainly from a local authority's perspective, where they've got a finite amount of money, they're probably ending up spending it more on the acute provision for those with additional needs than they would have been 10 years ago. Yeah. And so then you are looking for things to fill the gap. And that isn't always easy because setting up youth organisations isn't straightforward and funding them on an ongoing basis isn't easy. So it is really, really challenging. There are some brilliant voluntary sector youth organisations and there are still some brilliant statutory youth organisations delivering, but there's no doubt provision shrunk. I mean, you've seen the stats, I'm sure, over the last...
Yeah, just because I always feel that entry level, and I was never in trouble as such. You know, I wasn't in danger of kind of going down the wrong path. I don't think anyway. But just having that universal or that open access, and everyone not having it as a focal point as well, just to say I can go there if I need to. Or I guess they would have picked up a lot of the issues that might come out further down the line that we have to fund it and they're more expensive down the line. So it's difficult to get head around it. But yeah, as I say, you guys have got loads of programs that are doing a really great job. In terms of that more successful strand, I'm just going to go back to that. Is that more successful as in kind of education and opportunities for young people? Or?
Yeah, it's more about helping young people. I mean, at the very base level, it's about helping young people with their confidence, self-esteem, and feeling that they can achieve something. So by coming and getting involved in doorstep sport at a StreetGames session, part of what the leaders and the coaches are so good at, and this happens in lots of areas of the sport, is about building up young people's belief in themselves. And then beyond that, when you take them and get them involved in volunteering and leadership, and then we run programs like our full-time volunteering program, which is where young people can then do employability skills as well. So they can do a level 2 multi-skills coaching qualification, but we'll also help them with CV writing and we'll support them with thinking about how they'd approach interviews, and they'll develop those skills whilst they're doing things that they really enjoy, helping other children play sport or be active in their communities. So that more successful one is very much about empowering young people and giving them the ability to succeed out with playing sport in their communities.
Yeah. I want to go back because you did kind of gloss over it. Like you said, you started with obviously yourself and Jane and the team, really small team, for people in that small office, and then now over 100 people working in the organisation. Are you able to kind of walk us through that journey or some key milestones in there? And well, I guess how did you do it, or how did the team do it as a collective?
Yeah, I mean, I think you mentioned a word earlier that's just so critical. I think it's partnerships has been at the heart of it all the way through for us, and making the right connections with the right organizations has been really important. So one of the things that helped our early growth was, rather than having a huge full-time staffing base, we used to second in people in different areas of the country who really knew their patch well and had existing networks and connections. So we were never going into anywhere cold. And the thing that's underpinned our success, I think, all the way through has been about working with organisations with whom we've got an alignment of purpose. So they want the same things for young people in low income areas as we do, and an alignment of values in terms of the way that we want to work. So we want to work in a way that's collaborative. We want to work in ways that are creative, and we want to develop things that have an impact and stick around. So the initial funders who supported us, and some have been on the journey all along, Sport England and the cooperative, gave us a really strong foundation to grow the number of organisations we connected with. And then over time, as our reach grew, we became more interesting then. So we got a larger contract with the Premier League, gave us some funding back in around 2008-9 to give out to lots of local community organisations to do pop-up sports in different places.
Because that's one thing I was going to pick up in terms of how you're funded. Is it all central, I guess, large funding grants? Or I know we'll probably talk about some of the programs, but is there any part of what you do commercial at all, or is it looking at those funding streams?
There are increasingly commercial elements, I think, for all charities. You've got to find ways. So one of the things we do is we do sell our training commercially now. So the training was all developed through grants and foundation trust funding, and also from some of our corporate supporters from 2010 to about 2016. And then what we've looked at is, out with the local organisations we support, how can we use that training to help higher education, for example, or to help further education, or to sell to others that are not our core focus, but actually still benefit from having our training. So that's an aspect that we've certainly commercialised in the last few years.
I guess that's the ideal model, right? If you've got some funding from someone and you've essentially been able to make it last 10, 11 years by creating a product and now selling it on. But yeah, so I did jump in. You were talking about the Premier League funding. So you received that Premier League funding.
Yeah, and again, that just helped us grow our reach, because the one thing we've never done as an organisation was give out large chunks of money. So we've never had any dependency from organisations on us. Right. So we might, at that point, we were giving out, we called them bundles of about £600 to £1,800. And that would just be enough to help an organisation buy coaching or venue time and set up a new session maybe for a year, rather than them always looking to us for funding. So on the back of the Premier League work, we were then really fortunate, obviously heading towards London 2012, the Coca-Cola came looking for us as an organisation that they could see were right in the heart of communities, were keen to develop physical activity, and also wanted to make a real difference in the lives of young people. And they've supported us now in different forms for 11 years. And that relationship initially was all about developing our training academy, and also about developing big multi-sport festivals that allowed us to bring all these community organisations together in sometimes Olympic venues for these amazing sporting days out. So again, just building the blocks of different funders and starting to diversify what we were doing. But Sport England, and then from about 2010 onwards, Sport Wales, were just crucial to underpinning us as a charity and providing us with the core funding that then allowed us to build all these other programs and activities on top of that. So their funding all the way through has been absolutely vital from that point of view.
And it was, I suppose, now if you're looking for new partners or new funders, do they tend to come in based around a obviously you're going to have shared values, etc. But are they based around a specific program as such, or is it that they would come to you and say, look, we want to get, so you've got CSR responsibility, etc., or we want to get involved and we want to do something like this, or is it more that you've already got your kind of schedule of what you're trying to achieve, and here's a program and we're looking for a sponsor?
Yeah, it tends to always be a negotiation, to be honest, because as you say, they will come with what they're hoping to do as an organisation, or if they're a trust or foundation, they'll obviously have really clear things that they want to spend their money on, and then it's about that kind of co-creation process to find the kind of program that works both for the funder but is also going to work for the local organisations and for the young people, and that's always a really interesting process, if you like. So developing that in a way that it isn't completely alien, because we've never been an organisation to just drop things on people. It's got to be there responding to the needs of young people and really relevant to where they are at that time.
That kind of demand-led approach, right?
Yeah, wherever we can. It's always a balance, but wherever we can, definitely.
For us, we're myself personally, and as well as the organisation, we're always interested in kind of data. Being a software company, in terms of your approach to data, I'm assuming it's probably helped you right from the start. But I'm really interested in how you've managed to kind of scale and then still maintain, I guess, evidence in the impact all the time, which is going to help you, as you have done, grow the funders and show impact and sustainability. What's the kind of approach around data in the organisation?
It's always been central to everything we do, as you say. I mean, it's underpinned all of our success, because when it comes to demonstrating to existing funders or to new funders, you have to be able to produce the evidence. And so over time, we've developed different systems for data collection. So we use a system called Views, which is a monitoring system that was developed by a cooperative called Substance. And we give licenses for that to all of the organisations that we support and fund. And the good thing about that is that it's not just about collecting numbers. It allows us to provide organisations locally with reports on their impact that they can use with funders. So it's not just about us collecting data for StreetGames purposes. It's actually about empowering local organisations to tell their own story. And it's something the sector is still working on. We're never going to get there as a sector with this one, I don't think.
I was going to say, so, I mean, that'll help them show their, I guess, show their competence as well, right? So not just the impact. You say, look, if they go to another funder, maybe for another project, they can say, I've delivered for StreetGames. This is my impact report. Yeah, love that. I mean, what's the challenges with that been? Because obviously, if these organisations are partners, kind of at arm's length, a lot of moving parts. Like you said, 1,400 different partners. Have you had any major challenges in terms of utilising certain systems or rollout adoption, that type of stuff?
Yeah, I mean, the guys that we work with generally don't like sitting in front of computers. They would much rather be out there coaching and working with the young people. And so I wouldn't pretend that there isn't always a challenge about getting data back, because there is. And a lot of what we've tried to do over time is to, rather than have it as a transaction where we give you a bit of money and you return your data every 3 months, we've tried to support organisations to really understand what measuring impact is about, and why it's more than just collecting numbers for a funder. But it's hard because they don't all have the IT capability. So working with the system uses fairly intuitive, but you've still got to pay attention. So that can be challenging. And particularly in the last 9-10 months, they just don't have time. In all of the challenges of COVID, they need to be focusing on the young people in their communities, not on filling in spreadsheets or forms. So we've tried to make that as easy as possible for them. But at the same time, we've avoided doing it for them because that won't help their own future growth.
Yeah, you might need another 70 staff as well then to do all that paperwork for you.
Totally.
I mean, we had talked about it before on the podcast around that culture change, just understanding that it's not just an additional task or additional work to do. It's obviously it's actually important and beneficial and valuable. Aside from data, parking that one, in terms of your role as CEO and just stepped into it recently. A nice New Year's present for you, I guess, with the lockdown 3 coming in. But what do you think? I guess normally we ask about recurring challenges, but I guess for you it's probably more of like your 100-day plan. What you hitting the ground doing and looking to achieve in the new role.
Yes. So it's strange stepping up from within an organisation, because if I'd have come in new, I think my 100-day plan might have looked a bit different. I think there's some obviously vitally important things to us at the moment, like sustaining these local organisations through the pandemic. So the last 9 months, we've spent a lot of time working with them on finding funding. We've supported organisations to find about £3.5 million in the first 6 months of the pandemic, and that is only likely to get more challenging, I think, as we move on, because the initial kind of emergency funding that was there in the summer is going to dry up. So finding routes to sustainable funding to keep these organisations running, to keep the coaches who do such amazing work in place, is a big priority for us. Some of the other things that are important to us at the moment, you'll have seen the announcements, thanks to amazing lobbying and Marcus Rashford, about the holiday activities with food. So that programme will be rolled out nationally from Easter. So we will want to make sure that wherever we can, we connect local organisations into those programmes that are going to be managed by local authorities, because we know the organisations we work with are just ideally positioned to provide good holiday activities, lots of physical activity, and also provide what's required in terms of a healthy lunch or whatever they've got to do.
Definitely. I know in that one specifically, I know that a lot of our listeners will be interested to know how they go about getting involved in that. Is it a case that you're I don't know what the setup, I know a bit of information came out, like the headline figure probably needs to be fleshed out, I guess, like everything that comes out from as a headline. But is it a case of yourselves are working alongside local authorities, or how, do you know what's the kind of setup? Is it a tender process?
So I think each local authority will be able to choose how it does and choose it. So each local authority's got an allocation of funding for the next 12 months to provide a minimum of 6 weeks of activity in holiday periods, in Easter, summer, and then at Christmas. So I'd expect that there will be local kind of tendering processes or local opportunities to get involved through local authorities. Because we've been doing this through Fit and Fed, our national programme, for the last 4 years, we were part of the pilots for what's now being rolled out. So the holiday activities with food had 3 pilot years, and we were involved in all 3. And we ran in partnership, the Newcastle upon Tyne programme for the last 2 years for the whole city. So that was working with 70 community organisations and reaching in the last 2 years about 15,000 young people who otherwise might be not having a great holiday. So we will be using our expertise, sharing our training and all those kinds of things with organisations that are going to be involved in delivering. And in some places, we might help the local authority directly if that's appropriate.
Yeah, no, I think that is going to be a massive impact. I think, especially summer holidays. That's the time when you get most of your childhood memories, right? So if we hope we can make some good ones, then it's going to be beneficial around. Moving forward a little bit in terms of Street Games, I know we're in the middle of the pandemic, and you obviously fighting fires and helping with the crisis at the moment with the partners. But if you had a kind of vision for where Street Games, where you want it to be 5 years, 10 years out, are you able to kind of let us in on your vision for that?
Yeah, I mean, we've seen, I think, the power of having an offer of community youth sport in low-income neighbourhoods. And our vision would be that every neighbourhood like that has that offer. So that's what we're kind of setting out to achieve. And it's probably a vision for the long term, but actually that's what's needed, because young people, where they don't have much money and their parents might be working 2 or 3 jobs just to make ends meet, they need sport delivered in a way that they can easily get to it, that it doesn't cost them lots of money, that they can play with their friends, and that it helps them to stay away from some of the challenges they might otherwise face in the communities in which they're living. So that's kind of the vision for us. And alongside that, there's a desire to make what we're doing even more youth-led. So we've got young people already really involved in what we do. We have a group of young advisors. There's about 100 of them nationally who run residentials for us and that kind of thing. But one thing the pandemic has allowed us to do is really hear more of the voices of young people and have a greater understanding of what they want. So 10 years time, my ideal vision would be a sports hub in every low income neighborhood, with young people heavily involved in shaping how that works, running it, and having their voices heard.
Oh, fantastic. In terms of your own personal philosophies and kind of, we always looked for some insights for obviously other leaders and seeing how you do things. From a business philosophy, or your opinion on what it takes to run a successful business or organization, obviously charity, but I know you're running it as a business, non-profit. What have you built anything up over your time there, or do you have any key philosophies that you draw upon?
I mean, my overall philosophy is about people, and actually the thing that makes the most difference to everything we do is the people who work for us, but also the people they work with. And for me, my job, as I see it, is to help make my team as effective as they can in supporting the organisations and the young people we're here to serve. So that comes first for me pretty much all the time. The other things from a more of a business perspective that we've learned over time is it's the classic one about do what you say you're going to do. So a lot of our success has been built on meeting and exceeding the targets that we agree with our funders. So if we've said we're going to do something, then we do it, and we do it as well as we can.
Exceeding it's always good, right?
It does help. It tends to make them more keen to come back. But the other thing I wrote down from a business point of view, just a note to myself, is what you would call being customer focused to us is all about understanding the needs of our beneficiaries, the young people, and the organisations that we're working with, and changing what we do over time. So we're not doing exactly what we did in 2007. We're still doing some things that will never change, but we've adapted and changed and developed our offer and what we do with organisations over time to reflect the changes, both in terms of what young people are interested in, but also in terms of what local organisations are seeing and dealing with. So that's been vital to us as well.
I'm always really curious anyway, but in terms of like personal development or performance, do you have a routine, especially now we're all locked in our house? Good to have a routine. Do you have anything that you do every day, or that you focus on, any habits that help you to stay on top of your game?
Yeah, I mean, not for everybody. I always walk the dog for an hour and a quarter before I start work, because I know then that I've actually done some exercise and my brain is moving. I don't come downstairs and go and sit straight at my desk.
So you're an early riser then? Is that like a 5 a.m. rise?
Yeah, not quite that early, but yeah, I'm out and walking well before 7. So yeah, so get out and do that exercise early makes a difference to me. And then the other thing is like always putting in, and it can't always protect it, but I mark out in my diary a kind of breathing space during the day, which allows me to just go for a cycle, go for a walk, go for a run, and just clear my head. And just having, even if that's only half an hour, that just keeps me effective, I guess, as I go through the day, so that I don't have too big an energy dip and start losing my effectiveness.
Yeah, for sure. It's easy to be in the home office and come out 8 hours later after just being absorbed by Zoom or whatnot at the moment. Normally ask this. I mean, this question I tend to ask. I'm going to ask it a little bit different this time, because you've just taken over from someone who's really successful CEO right before you. So, obviously internal candidate as well. But did you feel any pressure taking over and stepping up into that role? And I guess James was so successful. It's kind of where you're going to take it from now.
Yeah, I'd be lying to you if I said no. Absolutely. I mean, I think there's books been written on taking over from founders, And there's many examples. When we were talking about me doing a secondment initially into the CEO role, I used to talk about Alex Ferguson and the job of following Ferguson, because Jane's actually a big United fan, and it felt like that. And there's something about, well, particularly Jane, but I think there's something about founders of charities, founders of organisations. They have a particular energy, they have a particular way that they do things, and I think the challenge for someone like me coming into the CEO role is not to try and emulate that, because I can't. There's no way I can be Jane, but is to find my own way of leading the organisation so that it does carry on going from strength to strength. But was it daunting and scary? Yes, absolutely. And the number of people I've had tell me you've got big shoes to fill, I think I've lost count on by now.
Yeah.
So
last question for me. We always go back and we kind of say, this is my question to you. If we were going to go back in time, got a time machine, we can go back to the start of your career, and I guess you start of your career in kind of community sport. I guess we'd look at. What would you go back and tell yourself then? A little piece of nugget of information that you'd tell yourself anything. Go back and give you a bit of advice to your younger self.
I think I would probably go back and say, don't get hung up on people's job titles and where it looks like they're in senior positions, because actually, if you are keen to make a difference and you have good ideas, then people will want to hear them. So don't allow yourself to be trapped in hierarchy, and don't allow your thinking to be dictated by who looks more important, because actually what I've learned is the more kind of senior I become in structural terms, the more I've valued creative people with new ideas and good ideas, regardless of what their position was in an organization. So I think that's what I would have told my young self, is don't get hung up on people's job titles.
Yeah, no, I love that one. Just to wrap up, I just want to make sure that we get the message out a little bit as well. So in terms of people who want to, organizations or our listeners, if they want to get involved with what you're doing, I know that you've got, they could get involved as a delivery partner, but also I know you've got a lot of things going on at the moment, fundraisers. So is it a 2.6 challenge and the sport help appeal? Is it just hit the website? Have you got anywhere they specifically need to go to get involved?
Yeah, just have a look on the website. If they're a delivery organisation, there's something called Street Mark, which is kind of like our come and join in document. It doesn't cost anything, but it's an opportunity for organisations to express an interest at streetgames.org. And for those who might want to get involved with supporting us through the Sport Helps campaign, I mean, we've had some fantastic support from people like the LTA and from Welsh Rugby Union, with us being able to give out kit, tennis rackets and rugby balls to kids during lockdown, which is fantastic when they're stuck in their gardens or not able to go very far. Then please, just get in touch with us through the website or through any of our social media channels.
Oh, fantastic. Mark, I really appreciate your time. I know thanks for fitting us in. A lot going on at the moment, so appreciate that. And thanks for your time and really enjoyed our conversation.
Thanks, James. Good to speak to you.
Thank you for listening to this week's show. You can subscribe anywhere you get your podcasts. If you'd like to get in touch with us, you can write to us at dryphase.podcast@coordinate.cloud, tweet us at coordinatesport, or follow us on Instagram at coordinate_sports, or on my account at James_Ventures. This episode was produced by Nancy Kwamboka, with support from Claire Goodchild and Lola Small, with special thanks to Rochelle. I'm James Moore, and you've been listening to The Drive Phase from Coordinate Sport.